Hi, friends, and welcome to Live from the City Opera House. It's Storytime, brought to you by the historic City Opera House in beautiful downtown Traverse City, Michigan. I'm your host, Ben Whiting, and on each episode of this show, we're going to have a great story read by a special guest, and then have a fun activity that you can participate in right from your home or classroom that relates to today's book. The theme could be about anything from science, technology, engineering, art, mathematics, and even local culture. The theme for today's show is When I Grow Up. Now, have you ever thought about what you might want to be when you grow up? The potential and possibilities are limitless if we only have the courage to try new things. Now, of course, one of the main reasons we don't try new things is that we worry. We worry about what other people might think of us if we don't succeed at the things we attempt. But today we're going to be talking about having the courage to try new things and the limitless careers and possibilities that door will open up to us. For today's activity, we're going to be exploring the wide world of sports. Now, when you think about potential careers within the world of sports, you probably think about being an athlete, but that's only one path you could take. You could also be an engineer who creates protective padding to protect players from one another. And that's what we're going to do in today's activity. We're going to create protective padding for an egg. We're then going to take that egg and drop it and see how well our protective padding works. Now, for today's activity, you'll need a few objects. First, you'll need a raw egg. Then you'll need some foam, some duct tape, masking tape, white paper, colored pencils, and crayons. Of course, if you don't have these objects readily available, that's okay. Go ahead and watch as today's activity leader leads us through today's project, and then you can watch again later when you have the objects handy. And now on to today's book. Today our special guest is Dr. Nick Ceglarek. Dr. Ceglarek is the superintendent for Northwest Education Services, which helps kids learn and grow so they can get jobs in tons of different fields, such as being a chef or a mechanic or a nurse, and many, many more. He'll be reading the book, A Bad Case of Stripes. And with that, Dr. Ceglarek, take it away.
Hello, it's my pleasure to read today to you a book that's been written and illustrated by David Shannon, A Bad Case of Stripes. And we are so grateful for the permission of Blue Sky and Scholastic Publishing Corporation to be able to present this to you. So without further ado, A Bad Case of Stripes. Camilla Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla was always worried about what other people thought of her. Today, she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed to be quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror, and then she screamed. Her mother ran into the room, and she screamed too. "Oh my heavens," she cried, "you're completely covered with stripes." This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Miss Cream felt Camilla's forehead. "Do you feel all right?" she asked. "I feel fine," Camilla answered. "But just look at me." "You get back in bed this instant," her mother ordered. "You're not going to school today." Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid what other kids would say. And she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to Camille. "Most extraordinary," he exclaimed. "I've never seen anything like it. Are you having any cough, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching?" "No," Camille answered. "I feel fine." "Well then," Dr. Bumble said, turning to Miss Cream, "I don't see any reason why she couldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should clear things up in a few days. And if it doesn't, you know where to reach me." And off he went. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Crayon and the Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything was normal. But when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out in stars. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled out, "Let's see some purple polka dots." Sure enough, Camille turned all purple polka dotted. Someone else shouted, "Checkerboard," and a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon, everyone was calling out different shapes and colors, and poor Camille was changing faster than you could change a channel on TV. That night, Mr. Harms, the principal, called. "I'm sorry, Miss Cream," he said. "I'm going to have to ask to keep Camilla home from school. She's just too much of a distraction." And I've been getting calls from the other parents. They're afraid those stripes may be contagious. Camilla was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago, everyone liked her. Now, no one wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can do, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," sighed Camilla. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans, but she had been laughed at enough for one day. Well, yes, I see," Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mrs. Cream phoned the next day. "I think I better bring in the specialist. We'll be right over." About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. "This is Dr. Grop, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young." Then the specialists went to work on Camille. They squeezed and jabbed, tapped and tested. It was very uncomfortable. "Well, it's not the mumps," concluded Dr. Grop. "Or the measles," said Dr. Sponge. "Definitely not the chicken pox," put in Dr. Cricket. "Or sunburn," said Dr. Young. "Try these," said the specialists. They each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. "Take 1 of each before bed," said Dr. Grop. Then they filed out the front door, followed by Dr. Bumble. That night, Camilla took her medicine, and it was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she didn't feel different. But when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit quite right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant, multicolored pill with her face on it. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called. But this time, instead of the specialist, he brought the experts. Dr. Gord and Mr. Mellon were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camilla was poked and prodded, looked at and listened to. The experts wrote down lots of numbers. Then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gord finally spoke. "It might be a virus," he announced with authority. Suddenly, fuzzy little virus balls appeared all over Camilla. "Or possibly some form of bacteria," said Mr. Mellon. Out popped up squiggly little bacteria trails. "Or it could be a fungus," added Dr. Gord. Instantly, Camilla was covered with different colored fungus blotches. The experts looked at Camilla and then at each other. "We need to go over these numbers and back at the lab," Dr. Gord explains. "We'll call you when we know something." But the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure. By now, the TV news had found out all about Camilla. Reporters from every channel were outside her house telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon, a huge crowd appeared, camped out on the front lawn. The Creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, psychics, an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camilla's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail, but nothing worked. One day, A woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure Camilla. Close your eyes, she said, breathe in deeply, and become one with your room. I wish you wouldn't said that, Camilla groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth, her nose was her dresser, and the two paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran out of the house. What are we going to do? Said Mrs. Cream. It just keeps getting worse and worse. She began to sob. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was as plump and sweet as a strawberry. Excuse me, she said brightly, but I think I can help. She went into Camilla's room and looked around. My goodness, she said with a shake of her head. What we have here is a bad case of stripes. One of the worst I've ever seen. She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. Here, she said, these might do the trick. Are those magic beans? Asked Mrs. Cream. Oh my, no, replied the kind old woman. There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I bet you'd like some, wouldn't you? She asked Camilla. Camilla wanted a big, heaping plate full of lima beans, more than just about anything, but she was still too afraid to admit it. Yuck, she said. No one likes lima beans, especially me. Oh dear, said the woman sadly. I guess I was wrong about you. She put the beans back in her bag and started towards the door. Camilla watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at, eating them was nothing compared to what she's been going through. She finally couldn't stand it. Wait, she cried. The truth is, I really like lima beans. I thought so, the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camilla's mouth. Said Camilla. Suddenly, the branches and feathers and squiggly tails began to disappear. The whole room swirled around. When it was stopped, there stood Camilla, and everything was back to normal. I'm cured, I shouted. Yes, said the old woman. I knew the real you was in there somewhere. She patted Camilla on the head, and she went outside and vanished into the crowd. Afterward, Camilla wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care one bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had a touch of the stripes again. Well, thank you for allowing me to share the story of Camilla and the bad case of the stripes, and I hope you took away a valuable lesson. And that lesson is that you shouldn't let others decide what you like or dislike. You should be your own person. And more importantly, you should explore interests that really appeal to you, things that you really like to do. And don't be afraid about what others say if you want to know more about that. There are so many different opportunities out there. And those opportunities could include becoming a chef, or working on cars, or being an engineer and building bridges, or caring for the environment. All of these careers, all of these interests should be explored if it's something that's in your heart. And more importantly, do what you love and don't let others say you can't.
Thank you, Dr. Ceglarek. And now, before we take what we read and put it into action, it's time for today's moment of mindfulness. So, move around a little bit, take a deep breath, and quiet your mind so you can get ready for more learning.
All right, my friends, we're going to do 3 deep breaths together, and a really fun way that I like to do that is with something called a Hoberman sphere. There's little tiny ones of these, but I got myself a big one, and I want to share it with you today. When it opens, we're going to deep breathe in, filling our lungs. And then when it goes closed, we're going to breathe out through our mouths. Are you ready? All right, here we go. Deep breath in through your nose. Out through your mouth. Did you see our little friend Meddy Teddy hiding inside? He's breathing too. Ready? Deep breath in through your nose. Out through your mouth. That's 2 breaths. Let's do our last one. Ready? Deep breath in through your nose. Go. And let it out. Now take a moment and feel. How do you feel after those 3 deep breaths? I feel good. Thank you for sharing that with me.
And now it's time for today's activity. And to help us, we have Mr. Sam Walter, a teacher with Traverse City Area Public Schools, Blair Elementary. Mr. Walter, how about you introduce yourself and get us started with today's activity?
Hi, my name is Sam Walter. I teach 5th grade at Blair Elementary in Traverse City, and I have some of my wonderful students with me here today. This is Bryson, Ronnie, Gabby, and Addie. And we're here today to do a little STEM project with you. So guys, think about a time that you've played a sport. What happens if you fall down and you're playing a sport? What might happen?
You hurt yourself.
You could hurt yourself, okay. So how would you hurt yourself? What would happen?
You could scrape your knee.
You could scrape a knee, you could break a bone, right? So what have people done in order to make it so that you don't get hurt when you play sports? They have what?
Padding.
Padding. So they make padding to keep you safe when we play a sport, right? What kind of padding can you think of? What sports padding can you think of?
Knee pads.
Knee pads. What sport do you wear knee pads in?
Soccer, volleyball.
Soccer and volleyball, okay. What other pads might you wear?
Shin pad.
Chest pad. What do you wear a chest pad in, do you think?
Football.
Football, okay. Why would you wear a chest pad? What would that do?
Protect your heart.
Okay, protect your heart or your inner parts, all right. What'd you say, Gabby?
Shin pads.
Shin pads. In what sport was that?
Soccer.
And what does that do for you?
A goalkeeper, just in case like you get kicked or something.
Okay, so in case you get kicked. Have they always been the same? You think pads have always been the same as they always were?
No.
Now, anybody ever seen an old-fashioned football helmet?
Yeah.
What do they look like?
They had got one bar.
One bar, maybe? What else? You remember what they were made of a way, way long time ago? Did you guys ever see one a long time ago?
Wasn't it leather?
They were made out of leather. You are exactly right. They were made out of leather. Can you imagine putting a leather helmet on your head and going to play football?
No.
Now, why do you think they're still not made out of leather today?
Because it's not safe.
It's not safe, right? We found ways to improve that, right? We found better ways to do things, better ways to make things safe. And that's kind of what the project we're going to do today is all about, keeping things safe. And so you guys remember, like we've done in class, we're going to look at the design process, right? And we're going to start off first. I'm going to give you some constraints. Anybody remember what constraints are?
Yeah.
What is a constraint?
Like the problem you may run into.
Okay, the problems you may run into are the only things you can use, right? And I'm also going to give you a design problem. I'm going to show you the materials that you get to use today, okay? The design problems today, you are going to, using only the materials I've given you, you're going to build a pad or a platform that can keep an egg protected as we drop it. Constraints to keep in mind as you're planning. The landing pad must be between 15 and 30 centimeters wide. It can be no more than 6 centimeters tall. So take a look at that. Try to figure out how tall 6 centimeters is. Your materials for today, I got a couple different materials for you today, not many. One set of materials I have for you is a cut up pool noodle. I just took a pool noodle and I cut it into a bunch of different shapes. So you got a bunch of different pieces of pool noodles, some bubble wrap. Everyone loves bubble wrap. No popping it won't work as well, okay? And the final thing is the bag itself. And that's all you have. Oh, and duct tape, I'm sorry, and duct tape. The first thing we do we start building right away?
No.
No, what do we do first?
Design it.
Design it. If you would go ahead and design what you think you're gonna build today, okay? Talk about it and go ahead and design what you think you're gonna build.
You think? And we should put like pool noodles like around it, so just in case like that.
Pool noodles rolling on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe some like extra bubble wrap on top.
How are you gonna use the duct tape? Are you gonna use the duct
Maybe
tape?
we could like tape the pool noodles around it so they don't fall off.
So they don't fall off? All right, sweet. You haven't figured out the bottom yet. What are you thinking? Look at the materials you have. What do you think you could use for the bottom? Not many materials, is there?
Do you have any other ideas? If we could make like a box or something that we could,
So you're thinking of a box?
and then we could fill it up with like pool noodles and.
So you're thinking of building a base box and then filling that up with pool noodles inside it. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we come to the point where we're gonna actually start building, okay? We're not testing at all. Remember, in the design process, the first thing we're gonna do is build before we test, right? Gotta have a completed product that we can actually do. All right, you can dump them out and you can start building your
Okay.
How'd you do your design and what are you thinking so far?
We just did it so it'd be like a cushion pillow almost.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, quickly talk about yours a little bit.
We almost might be a little too hard.
You're worried yours is a little bit too hard, okay? And you made yours kind of look like you built a box on the outside. What'd you put in the middle of your box?
Pool noodles.
Pool noodles in the middle of your box. All right. Well, let's find out.
Just climb
Ladies,
up.
come on up. Here we go. Are you ready?
Don't make us.
1, 2, 3. Oh, we had a little bit of a bounce, but we seem to do okay. All right. All right, gentlemen, let's give yours a try.
Second guess yourself.
Okay, Ronnie, whenever you're ready. Oh, and I think
Ready?
we're kind of not looking so good, Ronnie. We were kind of successful, right? A little bit successful, but what happened? What did we notice? Because in the design process, what we would normally do now, we're not going to do that today, but what would we do next? we would do what?
Not so bouncy.
We would rebuild it, make it not so bouncy, right? How might you make it not so bouncy, do you think?
Maybe
duct tape.
not so much poo noodles.
So not so many poo noodles? Yeah.
Instead of having it flat, go
Yeah.
in a little.
Also maybe having it curved in a little bit. So like curved it in a little bit, all right? I hope you take a chance to build your own at home. Really simple materials. I got a pool noodle and some bubble wrap, a little bit of duct tape. Our height was about 2 meters, just so you have an idea. Thank you so much.
Great work, everyone. Well, that is it for today's episode of Live from the City Opera House. It's story time. We hope you'll tune in next time, and remember, you can watch future and past episodes at tcaps247.com, on your local PBS station, and at michiganlearning.org. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, this is your host, Ben Whiting, saying stay safe, have fun, and keep learning. Take care.
This program is made possible in part by the Michigan Department of Education, the State of Michigan, Forefront Credit Union, the Schmidt Community Fund, the Les and Ann Biederman Foundation, the Oleson Foundation, and viewers like you.